So today I'm joined by Tad Hollis, founder of Better Outcomes Coaching and Mediation in Brisbane. Tad's a nationally accredited mediator with more than 30 years of experience and over 3,500 disputes behind him. His expertise spans across separation, parenting, arrangements, workplace conflict, and government cases. What makes Tad so special is his gentle approach to deeply human conversations, helping people feel heard and guiding them through the messy, emotional middle towards a calmer ground. He understands the real life pressures of parenting, co-parenting, and everything in between. His work is all about creating connection, clarity, and, as his business name says, better outcomes. And so, welcome, Thad, to Beanstalk Single Mums podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite, and thank you for allowing me to be here today. Yes, very much so.
It's lovely to have someone of your caliber with us. I'm sure the mums are eager to hear a lot of your wisdom. Having a bit of a read about you and a deep search on your blog, I found that you've had quite a journey from Bermuda to Australia, and your mediation approach feels just as unique. Can you tell me a little bit more about this shift and how it's influenced the way you help people through conflict?
Absolutely. The interesting thing is I began a journey of wanting to be a mediator when I was 17. I took a course in negotiations, and at the end of 3 days, we got an opportunity to mediate. And I found my niche. I was 17. I was in high school.
Wow.
And I thought, I'd love to, I want to be the person between the employer and the union, because I could see both sides. It took time. And to full exposure, I had to get into recovery myself. I had to find a way out of a self-imposition to a new freedom. And I was able to say, this is something I wanted to do. And so I applied for a job as a mediator working for the Bermuda government. And that began the journey. And I got opportunity to do training, meet with people, and to do that, and be a co-author and draftsman of employment laws, and work with human rights, and work with families, and to help people find peace in crisis. And so I was working and living in Bermuda, where I was born. My family's been there for over 400 years. So it's very much a community that I had roots in and was known and was comfortable. And it's a small population of 60,000 people. The entire island is 54 square kilometers. So we're intimate. And so problems can be exaggerated. We know each other well. And so that familiarity can breed some contempt at times. And so it's navigating that between people, and then having the opportunity to travel overseas for the government, to be a mediator, all of those things. So Bermuda was a great experience for me. And then I was able to be a director of HR and still keep my practice as a mediator, and then start my own private practice in 2004. But moving here to Australia, I was really starting over. It was a new beginning. It was a transition. I had that familiar environment where I was in my own cocoon, where I knew everything, and I was comfortable, and I knew my people, I knew my resources. And my partner, she's the Australian, she's the love of my life, and she says, I want to go home where my mom is, and we can have opportunity. And I went, yes, do that, because I couldn't imagine life without it. So I took that chance, but it was starting and looking at, well, what do I want to do? I've done start over, I've done again, but now here I am. I was 59 years old and going, so how do I start? Where do I go? What do I do? And it was, well, you know how to do this. It's one day at a time. We'll start at the beginning. So the best way is, let's build a network. And to do that, let's get an Australian credential. So I went and got my national accreditation. And then I went and became a family dispute resolution practitioner. I got qualified in that. And I began to build a network and find friends and to find common ground. But it's been a process. I've been here for 4.5 years, and it wasn't an overnight just walk in and say, well, Thad's here, so welcome him. It was, I had to prove my mettle. I had to do the work. I had to turn up and suit up and show up and be present and be authentic and be vulnerable and be a little scared, because even though we speak English in Australia like we do in Bermuda, there are differences.
I imagine a completely different culture.
And yet so similar at the same time. The differences and the similarities, but I'll give you an example. I was asked one day, so how are you traveling? I said, by car. Because, I didn't realize someone was asking about how my mental health was as a mediator. I had to learn things like, so-and-so's feeling crook today. Okay, got that. Feeling poorly, unwell, or sick. So there was just little nuances of language, and I'm still learning.
We
And I think
certainly
it's
do have
exciting.
our slang, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's exciting. My goal in life is to continue being teachable. And so Australia has given me those challenges, and there's been times in which another certification, and then it's like, oh, why not? And then realize that if I really want to be of help today and be useful, then I can do that. And if I can learn a new skill and practice something new, then when a client presents with something that is unusual, I can think I have someone I can talk to. And that's my goal, is to have resources and that benefit those that I work with, and it's not about benefiting me. So that's been my journey, and it has been a starting over with a familiarity, but some very new beginnings at the same time, and allowing the discomfort to be comfortable, because it's in the discomforts that I find where the true gems are, and where my strengths can really blossom.
I love that bit that you just said, allowing, that discomfort to be your new comfort. That applies so well to our demographic. But I wanted to pick up on something else that you've said earlier. Like, most people run away from conflict.
Mhm.
And you, at the age of 17, were drawn to put yourself smack bang in the middle of it and help people defuse the situations. That is such a unusual desire and an unusual way to want to navigate your life into the fire rather than away from it. That's very interesting.
And Kendi, I was the one that wanted to break up the fight. Yeah, I want the best for people. And so better outcomes is really the goal. And I've always found that I've never been happy being a bully. I've never been happy being the antagonist. I've had to negotiate and do that. But my comfort's always been at understanding where both or all parties are and saying, where's the common ground and how do we achieve the better outcome for everybody, rather than a win-lose situation, because no one really wins in the situation like that.
No, that's very true. I've noticed that you are known for helping remove the heat from
Hmm.
conflict and applying this to our demographic of mums who are juggling
Yeah.
from everything from co-parenting disagreements to workplace pressures. What does that actually look like in practice?
Always understanding that there's always going to be things, stuff, actions, pressures. I mean, being a single mom, I think, being a single parent, but being a single mom, I mean, there's so many expectations on a single mom. There's so many things that, and then the self regulation of, I feel guilty. I feel shame. I haven't given the kids the attention they need. And that inner dialogue starts to really wear in. And it's so easy to say, just stop. But it's so hard to put into practice. So I tell my clients, well, go find somewhere where you can say to the kids, and it might be in the bathroom. It might be just a quiet corner, just to say to the kids, mommy needs 10 minutes, right? Or it might be finding a quiet space somewhere where you can just have a mug of tea and just go, okay, I'm okay. I'm whole. I'm sound. I can do this. A mantra of confidence. I was working with a client on Tuesday, and I said, try this. I am confident. I can do this. And I know that I am whole. And
Nice.
I just had her repeat it back to me 3 times. And I said, so when you're feeling discomfort, you're feeling uncertain, just pause. And she says, I can feel my heartbeat slowing down because you're breathing. When we get anxious, I know I do. I hold my breath. And when I hold my breath, my body goes into 3 states. It either goes into fight, flight, or freeze. And none of those are my best states. So as a single mom, it's like, so when you've got all these things, like you've got pressures, you've got texts coming in, you've got the ex saying, I want to take the kids this weekend. You say, but it's my weekend. The school's calling about your daughter was in a fight this weekend. All these things are happening. You can't address everything at the same time. It's humanly impossible. Not unnecessary. We're very human. We will make mistakes. Let's pause. Let's take some time. Let's just take that, time for ourselves that just says, okay, and then to ground. And then when something comes, you can look at it and go, I don't need to address that right now. I'll advise clients that, when you're getting a text from the ex and says, I want to take the kids this weekend and it's Wednesday, you can just put the phone down and say, I don't need to address this right now.
Not yet. That's right. I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah. And it's like, I will answer that, but give yourself some time. And if you get another text and say, I'm just in the middle of something, can I get back to you in about an hour? So you're acknowledging it, and that will stop the barrage. 9 times out of 10, it stops the barrage. Because I think when we look at a behavior that feels threatening, overwhelming, or coercive, We can give it permission if we start to feel anxious about it and it starts
Absolutely.
to wear on us. When we say, I'm not in this. This isn't mine. I can actually control that. And controlling it is putting the phone down, just putting it away. I say, I'm going to focus on what's in front of me right now because that's what's important. And then I can get to that. It's the most difficult thing to do, but it's just practice because I find in my own life that I didn't get the skills that I felt good about until I practiced them. And I'd stumble and I would fail and I wouldn't do it perfectly. And I still don't, but I do it much better than I used to. And I think that's what is key to being a single mom. I mean, it's the toughest job. Being a mom is hard enough and having a partner, but when you don't have someone that you can rely on and it's just you're everything. You're the chef. You've got to pick the kids up. You've got to make arrangements. You've got to hold the job. You've got to keep these. There's so many balls to juggle, and they just overwhelm. And it's up when we say to the overwhelmed, not anymore. I'm in charge of this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's 2 points there that I really wanted to pick up on. I suppose the first one, when you said, when you start to feel yourself becoming overwhelmed and when things are starting to get, is to take that break and to pause. And there is almost like a part of me that thinks back to the way things were and potentially connects with some mums out there where there would be an outcry of, I don't have time to pause. I have all these things to juggle. I have potentially a child that's 3 or 4, send them to school. They're not in childcare. They're on, attached to me 24/7. And I can hear this kickback to that statement. But I think the other point that you made about learning to put yourself first and learning those moments or those skills or strategies to block others, like having a look at that phone saying, right, there's a message from my ex. It is not really all that important. And even if it is, it can wait till I've cooled down and putting it away. I found in the early days, as I'm a single mum myself, I would be in those situations and I didn't have those skills down pat. But what I used to say to myself is I prioritize my child, and rather than getting away from my child and trying to have 5 minutes with a cup of tea or something, which at times even the toilet breaks, we're not on my own. I would actually lean into that and play with her. So at that age where she played, it was just a matter of putting her toys around her and she played, and I would just move some bears around. Physically, I was present, but mentally I was on a little holiday. I was taking that, I was still doing something, but I was also allowing myself to check out, because emotionally and mentally, I did not have to be engaged. I could still play and connect with her. Potentially it wasn't an educational game that we were doing, but she didn't care. She had mummy next to her and she was interacting, and it was finding that space for me to breathe. And I think a lot of mums or a lot of people potentially listening might, like I said, might have this initial kickback of, I don't have time. But it is trying to find those moments of putting yourself first and saying, it's okay, I can do these dishes and check out while I'm doing these dishes, or vacuum or whatever. I mean, obviously, if you're not doing something that requires your mental skills like driving or working or whatever, but there are plenty of mindless moments throughout the day that you can seize and allow them to be your checkout.
You reminded me one of the techniques when I found myself as a single parent, washing the dishes. Even with the dishwasher, I would wash the dishes by hand and enjoy the bubbles and the suds, because the kids would disappear. There was housework. They were teenagers, so it was a little different. And you're so right that I found, even as a dad with small children, getting on the floor and just being present gave them the comfort. Okay, you're with me. I'm okay. And just, and that was getting down to their level will calm me down. Yeah, there's a beautiful technique, and I know when I've had opportunity to be with my grandson, he dictates our pace and things, and we have fantastical stories. And he's now 11 and so much smarter than I am, and I'm learning things from him. He's designing his own computer games now. So, and I love the fact that he shares it with me, and we have our own WhatsApp account, just him and I. We have, so he'll give me dad jokes to look at. I'm like, okay, that's great. But I love what you pointed out. It is that if you don't have the time, and it's so true as a parent, you feel so overwhelmed. And as a single mom, there's so many things coming at you. To be able to mentally check out while still being physically present is an art that is so hard to master. But if you can just get that 10 minutes, that's such a great thing. And that 10 minutes turns into a really quality time.
Absolutely true. Thank you for that
Yeah.
beautiful
Thank you.
technique. Moving towards your specialty of
Mm.
divorce coaching or that conflict resolution, divorce coach is still very much a new term
It is.
in the grand scheme of things. And for mums that are considering separation, how does your role differ from a lawyer's and why can it be so transformative?
Lawyers, and there's some great family lawyers. We're so fortunate in Australia, but they focus on legal outcomes.
Mm.
Their role is to focus on what the law requires. They're not there as a counselor. They're not there to be your therapist. Although you may want them to, it's really not their role. Whereas as a coach, my role is to help with practical guidance through the
Mm.
family law. How do you build a team? I'll ask clients when they come to me, so, okay, well, let's focus on that. I'm thinking about separating. What's that going to look like? So we become future focused. What are we looking at? How are we going to plan this? So let's build a plan. And then as the plan evolves, we'll pull a team. So we may need to get a therapist in to help or a counselor to help with some of the regulations. We may need to plan who can we get to support you as you're trying to raise the kids? Who can be available to you? How do we build that for you? And then we can bring in a family lawyer when it's appropriate time. So you're not jumping in. So it's because engaging a lawyer may be necessary, but
Mm.
it's really when the time happens. So my role is really to provide the emotional support because separation, I mean, there's so much grief. We're losing a dream. I've yet to meet somebody that starts a relationship and says, well, how am I going to separate? Everyone starts a relationship with the best of aspirations, the highest dream. And when the relationship turns, there's sadness, there's grief, there's anger, there's disappointment. And managing that is what my role is to help the client manage that process of going through. And at some point, I've brought in a financial planner that they may need. Or yeah, let's get the accountant. And when we're getting ready into mediation, because as a family dispute resolution practitioner working under the Family Law Act, as a mediator, I can prepare the client for for that mediation process when a mediator is selected, selecting the lawyer, and I have a panel of lawyers that I can refer to, a panel of mediators, so that it's what's best suited for my client. So if you like, it's like a concierge service in so many ways. It's bringing a suite, but before we start that process, because so many people have approached me and said, "Look, I think I want to get separated." I said, "Okay, let's talk about that." Or I love this one. My partner, I need to fix him. He's not turning up. Okay, so now, and my question is, okay, now he's fixed. Now what? And I said, so yeah, there's our hopes and aspirations for our partners are, I said, it's always what we need. And so my role is to focus. So I don't only coach one person. And so my client is the person that I coach. I'm not going to be the mediator. I'll be the divorce coach to guide them through the process. And the term divorce coach really doesn't suit the process. It's how do I separate? And my role is to help with coaching through the process and pulling together. And the question comes up, and I love your website because it's like, so when can I start having sex again? Question comes up, and it's like, well, let's talk about what that might look like and what your ideal partner is, when you want to start dating, and this. No, I don't want. There's so many things that can be discussed as a coach because my role is to hold the safe space, to give the client opportunity to feel everything that's going on and not be. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm not qualified in that. But what I can do is to say, let's coach through that. Let's help navigate this really awkward discomfort that we have that's messy. And know that my role is to help provide hope because you're going to get through this. And there will be another side. And once you're through that, let's plan the future of how to live because there is life after separation.
Absolutely. It's interesting, when I separated probably about 10 years ago now, or almost 10, there was no such thing as a divorce coach. You could either go to a mediator like at Interrelate, for example, or straight to divorce lawyer. But in that heightened emotional state, you don't have time or capacity, really the space in your brain to research that and put yourself on the
Hmm.
best path. And then you do go to the divorce lawyer or the family law lawyer, and like Ella, who we interviewed last month,
Yeah.
she says, well, I don't have the capacity to counsel or to advise. I can tell you what the best thing is to do in regards to practicalities, but I can't. And then it becomes this schmozzle because
Hmm.
you've never been in this situation. Like you said, you never aspired to be in this
Yeah.
situation. You are grieving, going through, it's not a linear process. So one day you might be absolutely sad. The next you're infuriated and you want to kill the ex, or at least take everything away from him because he's just taken everything away from you, for
Yeah.
example. And not that it's rational, it's just these emotional, natural swings of going through a grieving process. So to have someone, like you say, sit down, take that on board and say, let's just give your
Yeah.
brain a direction and validate your emotions, but let's not act potentially on all these
Yeah.
emotions.
You know, I'll work with the client in drafting a communication. Like if you're going to send a text, let's draft it. I had one client that would start off and say, "Dear sperm donor." I'm like, okay, that's that may not be well received, whatever you want to say after. So let's try a different technique. What's his name? Why don't we try his name? And so we would practice text writing
Yes.
because there is so much happening. And,
Mm.
and then what about money? Money is, how do we handle that? Who's going to pay for what? How do I pay rent? I've got utility bills are coming, and then the ATO is always out there looking for money from me as well. And all of these things, they say, let's talk about it. Let's pace this. So because you're right. I mean, when I got divorced almost 25 years ago, it was very much, and that was in Bermuda, different jurisdiction, but the process is very much emotionally the same. We ended up negotiating our divorce on, I'll say, over coffee in a cafe, and we both acknowledged that the marriage had served its purpose, and that our focus was our children, and that was how we did that. But not everybody goes through that process, and
No, it's a
even
very
that,
lovely process.
it sounds lovely, but there were moments in which we were not our best, and there were moments in which I'm not proud of how I reacted, and I was really proud of how she took it, and she was graceful in the dignity. And then when it was her turn, I had to respond the same way. And we're still friendly, but we now live. She lives in England, and I live in Australia, and we're living in Bermuda, and our children are no longer children; they're fully inflated adults who I'm in awe of are still living in Bermuda. But the process that we went through was very unique to what I found most clients had, because most people just won't sit down. They
Mm.
need a third party. And 25 years ago or 20 odd years ago, it was very much you went to the lawyer, and the
Mm.
lawyer would be another lawyer on the other side. And I did go to a lawyer, a divorce lawyer, who specialized in family. And after an hour, she took $500 from me and said, "Here's the draft letter that they sent to me like later that day." And it started off addressed to my then wife saying, "You have left the family and have started an affair, and you've abandoned your children." And I was like, "You can't send her that. This is the woman that I married. This is the mother of my children."
Yes.
And so that was my approach at the time. I said, it doesn't matter how I feel about her.
Mm.
I can be angry, hurt, and disappointed in her choice, but you're not to write to the mother of my children that way.
Mm-hmm. Well,
They deserve better than that. They don't deserve my worst. They don't deserve this raising the ground and just burn and plunder. That's not the way we're going to do it. We're not doing the scorched earth approach. I want to remain intact, and I want her to be intact because we were together for 20 years. To honor that. That was how I wanted to approach it. And that's still my approach with clients. It's like, let's see, and I don't tell them necessarily that experience, but the attitude that I carry with that is, if we could actually get to an outcome where the father was respected, and what I'll say to clients, how do you think your children feel about dad? I think they love him. Okay. And you love your children. So let's honor that relationship in the same way that you would want your children to honor yours. And if we start with that premise, the communication can be a lot simpler. Our children love their dad.
mm-hmm.
And we know that dad may be all those things that we imagine that he is and feel, and can feel justified in those feelings. But, um, and working with dads as well as moms, Everybody agrees they love their kids.
Mm.
They may have different approaches, different styles, different ways of communicating, but they have a perspective that's their best often way they can do that. So it's often honoring that relationship that the children have is the starting point for me. And that was my starting point for my own separation was I know my children love their mother. They may not have felt good by their mom leaving, but I knew that they loved their mom because she's their mom. And why wouldn't it? She's an amazing woman and incredibly fond of her and in all of her. And we were in love and we got married and we had two amazing adult children. So that's the place I like to remind clients that let's start with how the children feel and use that perspective.
That's such a lovely place to take it to, because again, in that emotional upheaval, you do obviously love your children and you want the best for your children, but you potentially may feel, but people separate and divorce for different reasons, but there's always a valid reason there, whatever it may be, whether it is we're no longer working together or one party has done the other party harm. Then as people, as human beings, we take that hurt on board. And I suppose there's a part of us that wants to lash out and wants to hurt the other person. And despite loving our children so much and wanting what's best for them, there's almost a part that wants to be vindicated or acknowledged that I have suffered and that needs to be addressed. And so taking it back to that view of my child loves the other parent, not so much I love my child, but my child loves the other parent. So there must be some good in that parent still. It allows you to start that journey, I think, on a clearer path and a more constructive path, and potentially eliminate a lot more trauma, and the healing can start a lot sooner.
It takes the sting out
Mm.
because it doesn't matter who initiates the separation, both are grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be from my perspective, and say I'm the parent that feels wrong, and it's so easy to not, as a coach, it's not so much acknowledging how the other side might feel, but just to give a perspective as we go through conflict management, right? And looking at it and going, well, let's just for a moment imagine how we're going to communicate. How would that land?
Mm.
How would that be received? How do you think your partner, who you know better than I would, because you were with them, how do you think they respond? And they're, oh, he's a total asshole. Okay, well, but still, he may have feelings, and those feelings might help him respond. There are so many ways of deregulating and de-escalating
Mm-hmm.
because when hurt people,
Yes.
and when we're hurt, we lash out. And that's what I like about coaching. Create the crucible that you can latch out and we'll have that discussion. And if we need to bring in a counselor, then you can see a counselor as well to help work through that trauma and what that might be, because there may be other issues that you need to address as well. It's always something that can be opened and assisted. And I see coaching clients as an opportunity to help resolve misunderstandings, traumas, to bring things together and to pull a team to get through a process that often without coaching and pulling resources around a client can take 3 years sometimes.
Yes, I've known divorces to take anywhere between that and 6 or more.
Yeah, or more, and expensive.
Tremendous.
Without resources and still having to pay and pay. And ignoring even the financial costs, it's the emotional cost, the time that's invested, the having to hold space for the children while you're going through the emotional time lag and coming back and, as we were saying earlier, trying to find the time to sit down and say, I need to pause. Well, how do I pause when all of these things are happening? And I think that I have to say the greatest benefit of being a divorce coach is showing the client that there is an opportunity. And they're a client, and we get to be very intimate and very close, and to hold that safe space, to allow permission to have the feelings and to express them in a way that can say, okay, so we can then take that away and say afterwards, it's a different way of doing this. And it's really helping, particularly single moms. I mean, there's so much that single moms do. I've always been in admiration of how single mothers do it. And when I had my HR hat on, I'd say my best employees were the single moms because they don't waste time. They turn up on time, they leave on time, You can't ask them to work overtime because they will not work past the time because they got to go pick the kids up. Put
Very
in a
efficient
7 hour,
there.
incredibly efficient, the most productive, and yeah, they're not looking for accolades. They're looking for just pay me, make sure I have a job, and they're focused. They were my best employees as an HR, as a director of HR. I found that we had performance that was excelling and were often leading on the KPIs of other people.
Brilliant. That's lovely to hear.
And that was my experience. And I would say my favorite employees because mums are focused, particularly single moms. They're focused. Their focus is making sure their children are taken care of and fed and sound and safe. And the job is the means of providing the financial fluidity to that. But it's not the career. The job is a financial means and fluidity to make sure my children have their needs met.
Now, you've just touched on some of the hurdles that mums face in regards to working from that space of hurt and in that, processing the trauma and still having to juggle everything and be in that high pressure state. With your experience, are there any other common hurdles mums endure, so to speak, or face during separation? And what early mindset tools can you recommend to help them regain confidence and that sense of control?
I think, as I said earlier, the mantra, I'm safe, I'm whole, I'm confident. Because when we start a belief and we take it on, it then becomes our reality. But there are so many things that can fly. And I think the first thing is money. What do we do with money? And there are resources available. Government has resources available to single moms that can help. They're not the solution. And it's going to be temporary until you can sort out the parenting order or if that's necessary, or how are you going to budget? How are you going to pay for things? How the rent is going to be met? All those things happen. But I found that if we can just stand back, and it's a mantra, and they go, I don't believe any of that. And you go, well, you are confident. We're having a conversation and you're giving me solutions. And think as a mom that you go to the fridge and you think it's empty, and yet you prepare a nutritious meal for your children. That level of creativity and ingenuity shows just what the capacity is. So acknowledge that and know that if you can do that, that's a simple thing. But it is so important because you're accomplishing miracles by doing things for your kids with limited time and resources. That needs to be celebrated and acknowledged, because if moms do that on every day, but they just accept it as part of, well, this is what I do as a mom, but I think it's amazing. And I think it should be acknowledged. And I'd like to tell my clients, acknowledge that for yourself, that what you're doing is amazing, given that it wouldn't be your choice, but you can actually do these things and surpass, the expectations that you limited yourself by, and understand that you're amazing, because being a mom is great. I can't say it enough. I am in awe of what single moms accomplish, because there are so many prejudices and hurdles and misogyny and difficulty and harsh expectation.
I completely agree with that whole sentence that you just said, that it's used to be this way and it continues. It's a little bit improving. It's a little bit better, but it's still very much so. But then, so do you think just giving back and recognizing your own achievements, that helps you get through that, get over it?
It doesn't help you get over, but I think if we allow our beliefs to limit us, then we won't progress. But it's creating the faith in ourselves. And so when we believe we can accomplish things, we do it, because the human mind is an incredibly powerful instrument. It really is an instrument of great success. So if we imagine success, we create success. And it's simply acknowledging these small things lead to bigger things. So if we believe we're confident, we start to act confident. If we act with confidence, then we start to stride, and then we can stretch ourselves even more. Going back, you were saying from Bermuda to Brisbane, I could have sat back on my accolades and just said, well, I've done all these things. But I had to start afresh because I moved countries. I changed environments. I had a whole new beginning. Even though I had the love of my life with me, it was everything I had known was left behind. And that's what separation is for a single mom. It's everything you've ever known is left behind. But it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It does mean that it's a new start. There are new beginnings here. And I love the saying that an oak tree comes from an acorn. Great things, a mustard tree starts with a mustard seed, which is so microscopically small. We create great things if we believe in them. If we have enough faith in what we can do, we do that. And so often said, if you imagine that you can have time to raise children, hold a job, do things, it doesn't matter how many hours, you just to be present and pull all those things together. Imagine what else you can do with your mind and the next thing you can do. There's not an easy, turn on the switch and it happens.
Mm.
It's practice. It's getting used to the idea that life's now different. I'm on my own here, and this is just me.
I think you're absolutely right with that. Practice, that's the key word there. Starting with something small, something benign, like, I don't know, something that is just one incremental change that doesn't really tax you all that much. But then if you achieve it, you're like, okay, well, I've done that. Maybe tomorrow I can do a little bit more and a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you're changing that belief system, not by going, today I don't think I can do it, and tomorrow I'm going to flick that switch and I'm going to have confidence and I know I can do it. Because I think we fail that way, because tomorrow we're not going to wake up and feel that way. But maybe tomorrow I'll get out of bed and brush my hair and brush my teeth, and that'll be a better day than I had today, for example.
I'll make my bed today.
That's right.
It's a discipline that I made sure that I did when I became single and had kids. I made my bed every morning. I got out of bed and I made the bed first thing and brushed my teeth. Make sure I was eating nutrition. I made sure so I would forget to eat. So I had protein bars. That would be that and a glass of orange juice. And there would be days that was the only meal I would remember to take. And then it was like, oh, you know what? I can now, so I started food prepping. But it started with making my bed. I had to learn. I mean, I'd been in a relationship for 20 years and suddenly I didn't have someone that I would be preparing a meal for. So I had to learn how to really go back and cook for myself, by myself, because, my son was, Cameron was 17 and my daughter was 15 at boarding school. My son, he was on his own and he could do his own things and we would have meals together, but it was food prepping. But I know how to cook. I mean, my mom taught me well and I can clean the house and all, but it was funny. All those skills that I had evaporated when I suddenly said, I don't know how to do this. I'm overwhelmed. How am I going to be a dad and turn up? Here's what I did. And this is the advice. I got rid of everything that was the clutter in my world. I was on boards. I was serving the community. I was involved in charities. I stopped. I resigned. I said my sole focus is my children and my job. The job provides the means of providing financial security, and my children are my focus. And then I have to focus on, and then I said, well, hang on, I also have to focus on myself. I have to remember to eat. I have to remember to do exercise regularly. I have to remember to do food planning. So I make sure that we have food in the house. So I had to write out a list, and I was like, okay, I know how to do this, but it was small steps. And it started with making the bed. And then it'd be like, okay, I made the bed. Now I've eaten. Okay, now I'll get showered, get dressed, go to work. And it was literally just telling myself, these are my steps that I'm going to do. And it just built in confidence because by repetition, I got more confident with it. And then we started making more elaborate meals and we started having dinners together and I can invite friends over and cook meals. But it was a very lonely beginning.
I think a lot of our audience will resonate with that very much. That is some great tools there. Very simple. It often is the simplest things that help us achieve much greater things. Going back to your divorce coaching or mediation experience, a lot of our mums talk about how the hardest part of separating, besides trying to start to live again and be overcoming that overwhelm, is finding a co-parenting plan that supports their kids. And I know you've touched before about putting yourself in the kids' shoes in regards to how they feel about their parent. So how do you help parents shape arrangements that are respectful and clear and sustainable?
Very much what are the needs of the kids? And so it's going to be the children's first and then suiting the needs of the parents. And of course, there's always a negotiation where one has the power and one is in, and it's, you may need a mediator, but initially, it comes down to telling each other how are we going to meet the needs of the kids. And for instance, if you have a baby, does it make sense that dad takes the baby for a fortnight? Or does it make sense that mom has and dad gets Saturday mornings or something and gets, yeah, It's really rationally looking at how are we going to do this for the benefit of our kids. And often this isn't about a logic. It sounds very simple when I'm saying it, but it's having to express it in a clear way and helping the father understand that I'm not trying to take away your time. I'm trying to make sure that we're getting the best opportunities for our children. We may have after school that has to be addressed, and you can pick them up then rather than so we're not taking time away. And it's addressing the fears, and it's sometimes it might be best to express in a text to help do that, particularly if there's still hurt and we want to lash out.
Mhm.
That happens a lot. And the other side lashes out. Everyone has their own pain, but suiting the needs and tailoring it to how are we going to do that. And I've got so many scenarios running through my head that I've seen in parenting plans and co-parenting. Some have been so beautifully done, and some have been so awkward that they've had to come back as the mediator to come back to me 3 months later and say we need to try this again.
Mhm.
Where I really wish I could have coached them, because maybe we would have ended up with a more flexible document that would have given them, you know, Sue and John are now 2 and 4. This co-parenting plan is going to look very different in 10 years' time. So we also know it's going to look different in 6 months. So let's ensure that we just keep communication open to meet what we can do, because schedules change. I've suddenly got time off from work. Is it okay if I pick the kids up from school today? I want to take them for dinner. Okay, I don't want them to go to Macca's. Okay, where would you suggest? It's open dialogue and trusting each other has got to be the beginning. But it takes time and small steps, because when there's hurt, trust is not going to happen. And trust is something that's earned, and it's going to ebb and flow as you get used to this new arrangement. Because in most relationships, one parent steps up and does most of the child care. Suddenly, in a separation, the parent who has probably been involved for maybe 5 or 10% suddenly says, "Hey, I want to really be involved now." And it's like, well, hang on, where have you been?
That is such a
And
common thread of
yeah,
conversation that I am privy to. It's unbelievable.
and it's say my answer is, well, kudos for he wants to turn up, but let's give him time to grow into that, because he's going to be overwhelmed with suddenly like changing diapers if he's never changed a diaper. So help him. There's not a clear answer. It's really meeting the needs of the children and balancing it off against what the parents want, right? And the parents suddenly turning up and say, "Hey, I want to be super dad." I hear a lot about Disney dad, and I say that's for now. Allow them that pleasure. You get to be mom, during school, during the traumas, the dramas, the fights, the relationships with other kids in class and what's going on. They get to be Disneyland dad. Well, that's how great that is. And work on that. So eventually you can have time and they can take the children for a fortnight.
I think that kind of would get a little bit of a hit back from the
Yeah.
audience because, or at least
Yeah.
from me, it's like, why should I always be the one that is the responsible one? But
Um,
I see what you're saying. I mean, in a way, kids need both sides of the story. It's just, I
yeah.
suppose, as the caregiver, not in my scenario, but I know in other mums' situations where they would also like to be the Disney mum, but they're
Yeah.
just not afforded that through the way things are set up.
My answer to that is, well, if it wasn't like that while you were together, why would it be different when you're separated? And I completely understand the resentment and work with it, because as a single dad, I watched my ex get to be Disneyland mom. And I'd be sitting there going, yeah, but I'm the one picking up the pieces. But it was like, you know what? They're getting some really great experiences, and I just have to suck it up and know that it's also not a forever, because it's going to change.
It's again going back to that what's most important for the child and putting yourself second, which is quite, I mean, we talk about putting yourself first to ensure your needs are met, but then also in the same breath, we're saying you have to put yourself second to ensure that their needs are met. And it can be hard to balance the fine line of looking after yourself and nourishing yourself and your soul, your mind, and your body, but then also stepping back and as a parent going, well, this child I've created need both needs met too. And if the father's providing the happy times, and I'm providing the structure, I'm still contributing to that child's development. And I'm still, it may not be what I want to be doing, but at the end of the
Hmm.
day, I'm still bringing up a balanced individual.
Yeah, and that's where it's in the coaching environment as opposed to the mediation environment, but in the coaching environment, because we're more fluid and we're not constrained so much by the legal ramifications, but
Mm.
more about how do we emotionally deal with this? Because it's disappointing, it's hard, it's unfair, right? And my rule isn't to say, well, suck it up. It's like, yeah, it's unfair. So what would fairness look like? Like, how would you express that? And so it's exploring how to do this differently so that maybe you could be Disneyland mom once. And what would that look like? And how would you get to that point? And what kind of conversation would that be? Because it's not an impossibility. And it's also just because it's happening that way today doesn't mean it's a forever because things change and our children grow. And I mean, if you ever raise teenagers, we know that teenagers have a completely different take on parents than they do when they're 5.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking from experiences yet, but well, I am because I was a teenager once. So
Yes.
100% understand. But I guess what I'm hearing
Yeah.
throughout everything that we've talked thus far is there's this component of conversation and communication, being able to have tools that allow you to communicate through tricky conversations. Do you have any specific tools that you always revert to in your practice or to get the best out of a conflict situation?
Listen, listen. It's active listening. One of the things that we as human beings always do is we have an inner dialogue going while someone's talking. I'm guilty.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things is I have to really work at silencing that inner dialogue or minimizing the chaos that is created in that noise that I have in my head so that I can actually hear what's being said. I'll give you an example. My daughter at 15 stood in the kitchen one day and yelled at me and said, "My parents are divorced and they have their own partner. I don't know what to do." And I looked at her and I went, "Okay, you know what? I am so sorry. I have been about me right now and what my needs are, and I haven't been focusing on what you have been saying to me." And so it was that. So I said, "Can we talk now?" She says, "I don't want to talk to you." I said, "Okay." Yeah. Then, so help me understand what I can do better that to meet what you're asking for. And she says, "Okay, I can do that." And then I had to stop being what I thought was a good parent and just be a listener and hear that she wanted to be able to have her Disney time too, and she wanted to be able to have her autonomy, and she wanted to be able to know that there were certain freedoms and that she knew that Dad was always going to be there as a safety net, but she didn't want me to be the policeman at the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She didn't want to feel that I was smothering her because that's why I don't want to stay with Mom. I get that from Mom, and I do get that from you. And I was like, okay. And then so it was basically exploring the options that we could agree to, but it started with listening.
And it's so easy to fall into that when you are listening, but then you've got that voice in your head that's already judging and interpreting and perceiving what's being said through your lens, that you end up superimposing your own direction onto whatever's being said, and
Mm-hmm.
you may not even interpret it completely correctly. So that's a great tip.
I can remember that because that was that shining moment in which I suddenly went, I need to stop being what I think is a parent and just step out of that role for a minute and listen because she's telling me what she thinks she needs and what she wants, and I'm not listening.
I think that's easier to do
Yeah.
with your children than it is to do with your ex or someone that you're in conflict with. But I completely understand how the principle can be applied to both.
So with your ex, this is a person that you know well. So you also know which buttons to push. So what happens if we don't push the buttons? What happens if we decide not to engage? And then we start to say, well, maybe they have a point. Yuck. Yeah, exactly. I think the hardest thing is to say, they might be right.
No way. Never. No, I'm obviously playing devil's advocate now, but yeah, that takes a lot of self-regulation.
That takes a lot of active listening and it requires I have found an experience with clients to get to that point in separation is that we've got a team around them now. They've gone to a counselor. They're coaching it. We're getting coaching on a regular basis. They're practicing good nutrition. They've gone to yoga, Pilates, meditation. Let's start doing some of the inner work that's going to help you. And again, when do I find the time? Well, we can do that at home. If the kids are taking a nap, that's also 15 minutes that you can have for yourself.
YouTube is amazing for that.
YouTube. And yeah, it's like let's find the resources. And that's what I look at as my role. So let's identify the resources that you need are going to meet you where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can evolve that. The other thing I think telling clients is that just because something's happening today this particular way, that's not the future. That's today. Yesterday's already done, so we don't have to dwell on the past. We don't have to. So let's be future focused. How are we going to manage this tomorrow? What are we looking at? It's so to deregulate an escalated argument is this really going to matter tomorrow morning when I wake up? Am I still going to feel this way in a week's time? Maybe. But how important is it going to be in the scheme of things? One of the questions I was asked, will anyone remember this in 10 years?
Yeah, I like that. That's one of my favorite things. Like, will this matter in 10 years? Yeah. And at that point in time, obviously, often out of reflex, but people will go, absolutely, it will. But then as you sit and you reflect, you realize that no, it won't. But I suppose too, in the person we're describing, like you said, once they have all these things in place, they're probably not going to need you very much longer anymore. They're kind of at that outer end of the journey, aren't they?
It can be. I mean, there are clients that I have worked with for 9 months. There are clients that we've done 6 sessions and they feel they're good. It's what is my rule is what does my client need, not what I want out of this. And it's often what I think my client needs, because my client actually will tell me what they need. And 6 months, 9 months, sometimes only 2 months. It depends on, I've had clients in which in 3 sessions, we went from a co-parenting plan that was a disaster that lawyers had been working on for 2 years. And in a 2-month period, they were able to negotiate it without lawyers.
Wow.
And come up with, and all I did was just coach mom. And it was 3 sessions. I mean, we had a 3-hour session initially. After our second session was 3 hours, but it was very much about let's go through. So we did training around how to communicate, and what the groundings are, and reinforcing the good behaviors that she had that he responded well to. He was engaged to be married. She already had a partner. They've been separated. They've been divorced for 2 years, and we're still struggling on how to do a co-parenting plan. And it was getting mean and expensive. And in 2 months, they managed to have a plan that I checked in with her, and it's still working a year later.
That's impressive. That's an impressive result. I think what you do is bring a balance to this through the fact that you work with both men and women in these emotionally charged situations. And besides sort of being that active listener, how can single moms approach this co-parenting with compassion, even when it's tough? Are there any other skills that we can hone into that would work? Because it's hard in that early stage.
I once taught a course in negotiations. I was 8 women. No men turned up because men know how to negotiate, right? Of course. So 8 women turned up. They're all moms. And I asked, how many of you have children? They all raised their hands. I said, how many of you successfully negotiated with a 4-year-old? All the hands came down. I said, okay, so if any of you can you could stand up here and teach me, because negotiating with a 4-year-old is the most illogical, frustrating process that we could ever have. So recognizing that we're not going to win is where we begin. So what we're looking for is the best outcome that is a win-win. So it's understanding what the needs of the other party is, as well as understanding our own needs, and really looking at what do I need here, and then saying, if I want these things, how do I help them deliver them for me, and what do I need to give in exchange? And this is any negotiation. If you're buying a car, it's the same process. It's like, what do I get from the auto dealer? How do I convince him to give me the car, or her to give me the car? So negotiation is always understanding what the other party is also looking for, and using your best guess as to what that looks like, and also not being emotionally invested in your own outcome.
It's hard,
and that's really hard. It's so hard, because I can't negotiate for myself.
Mm-hmm.
and be successful. I actually have to become a little schizophrenic, fire me and hire this really successful negotiator that really understands how to do this stuff. But it's because it's not me and not here. And I have found that working with clients, I can help them develop the skills to negotiate. And it's really the their own abilities and their own style, not mine. Theirs. And then I had one client who recently, um, we worked together for 6 months, was able to sit across from her soon-to-be ex-husband and look him in the eye and saying, the only thing I want is what's fair, and I want half. Now, prior to us coming together, just to think of him would make her quiver.
Mm-hmm.
Well, being a man, she wasn't even certain she wanted to work with me. So
Mm-hmm.
we did a phone call. Then we got into Zoom. What I love about Zoom is that I can still read body language. I can still see what's going on. I can still hear the intake and breaths. I can still see what's happening. I can see changes can go on. So I could recognize where triggers were happening.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to role play what it would be like to go into mediation. We're able to deregulate the anxiety. And it's not about eliminating it, it's about deregulating it from controlling her body. And we did some really successful sessions to help her get to the point where she was able to go into the mediation by herself with the mediator, look at her ex in the eye, and say, this is what I want and why I want it. And I was a lifeline. I said, you can take breaks during the mediation. If you want, you can tell the mediator, look, I just want to take a 15-minute break. I'm a phone call away, because we'd agreed that there was only going to be the two of them in the session. They weren't going to have any outside third-party assistance or legally assisted. And, it went well as a result. That she was able to do that, and he was completely rocked. That's not his wife. It was a controlling relationship for 20 years. He made all the decisions and made sure that she had all these things and kept her very much isolated, and was not used to seeing somebody stand up to him, particularly the woman that he'd known for 20 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Some
that was
powerful stuff.
she is an amazing young woman, an amazing mom, and just I am so proud of the confidence that she exudes now as a result of finding her inner strength and being able to use that.
That is absolutely beautiful, and it's lovely to hear such an amazing story of empowerment. And I can absolutely hear other mums in that story too. I wonder, as you're talking though, you seem to hold so much space for your clients with the emotional upheaval that they're going through. How do you care for yourself so that you don't become overwhelmed by everybody else's overwhelm?
Great question. It really is. And I have a great community that I get to lean on that's nothing to do with coaching or divorce or family. It's a mutual support group that is in recovery. So I just get to go and be present in that. And that just is a grounding. I do practice meditation. It's part of my daily connection with grounding. And as we were saying before we started the recording, I am always a little nervous when I'm doing a mediation for that. And so I invite in, it's going to sound weird, but it's called rose quartz light. And I invite the protection for my clients, this or something better. And that may I not be an impediment to their well-being and growth, so that I can be out of the way for what they need. Because it's more important that my clients get what they need than what I need. Because I'm getting what I need by being present for my clients and listening. And then I just deregulate, and I occasionally use sage smudge to help. Anything that's been particularly difficult. Breathing is a great technique that I'll have just to deregulate. And then walks. I mean, I live in Queensland. I have great nature walks that I can go on, and I get to just walk along, by the stream or by the creek, and see koalas and parakeets and everything that's just around me. It's just,
Nature is amazing, isn't it? In that respect, it's such a healer.
Yeah, and that helps ground me. And also knowing that even when clients are enraged and can be directing it to me, it's not about me. It's their inner frustration, and they need somewhere they can bounce it. So even though sometimes it does, I do need to just let it go. But yeah, those are just the techniques that I've evolved, and it's having a community of support and learning techniques that just ground me every day. It's a daily practice for me.
You've shared so many techniques with us, from how to communicate better to how to overcome overwhelm and how to communicate with our exes better. This has been a really lovely hour that we've spent chatting. I really enjoyed it. You didn't just touch on the aspects of mediation, but a total holistic aspect of that process and how to honor yourself in it. To wrap everything up, what would you say to a mum who's in the thick of it that you haven't said already, that is feeling stuck, maybe fearful or unsure of her next step? What's one last powerful thought or habit that she can hold on to today?
You're you're not alone. There are people that love you. There are people that want you to be well, and there are people that want to help. It's finding the time and the space and the courage. And I think when you're in that situation, the most difficult thing is finding courage because you feel alone. You feel like there's nothing. And reaching out for help is the most courageous act that you can do for yourself. And it's also the hardest because you're now becoming vulnerable and you're not a failure. You're now human and you're experiencing what so many of us have experienced in loss and grief. And there's a death occurring. And if we don't acknowledge that, it starts to become more overwhelming. So the one thing I would say is you're not alone. That there's a community that's just really there to help. It's finding the courage to go and find them and to seek them. But we're here. So many people that want to help
Yes.
in the family law arena that are there. Good people who are lawyers and counselors and work in domestic violence and work with the courts and work as coaches that are there to help.
A very powerful reminder right there. Thank you for that, Tad. That's very true. In any trouble that we find ourselves in, we do tend to draw in and isolate. So to have that powerful reminder of being able to reach out, and that there is, even though we may not be aware of who it may be, but there is someone out there that is able to help us. And all it takes is just to put your hand up.
Know that it will be welcome.
Yes.
I think
Not being a burden. Someone wants to help.
And you talk to your friends, but your friends aren't going to be the ones that are going to be your best guides. But certainly reach out, ask, and there's so much more that could be said. I love the fact that I have the privilege of being able to be of use at home.
That's amazing. Thank you so very much for spending this time with me today.
Thank you.
I'm extremely grateful for it, and I think we've just touched on so many beautiful points there, and given so many really tangible tools and strategies and skills for mums to be able to utilize. I'll put a link in the show notes to Better Outcomes in case there is a mum that would love to work with you. Yeah, I really would like to say thank you so very much for spending this time with me today.
Thank you so much, and really appreciate it. And I want to say I love your website.
Oh, bless. Thank you.
I really do. You have everything in there that so many mums ask. Like, just when do I start dating? What do we do with sex? How do I prepare me? What's my next step? I'm thinking about separating. You've got all those things that are there up on your website, and I love it. I
Thank
think
you.
it's such a wonderful tool. Thank you so much for doing this work. I do want to acknowledge that because you're doing a very important service to a community that gets forgotten, the struggle, that it really is there to be a mom. So thank you for doing this.
No, thank you. Thank you so much.